So this is an introduction to filing and using of files and finishing off and tidying up our bits of metal. What we've got some files of different shapes. They come sort of really coarse, start off with coarse, and then they get finer in abrasiveness, that is. You get different shapes, so this is a half round, triangular, a round file and a flat file. And they're the sort of general ones that we would use for most shapes of our work. The next step after using files, then we use emery sticks. So these are different shaped sort of bits of wood that are covered in emery paper, and some are fine and some are coarse. The higher the number, the finer the abrasiveness is. So these are 1200, and they're sort of very fine, and then this one's 240, and it's quite a coarse one. Okay, so we're going to look at our little pieces that we've cut up, and at the edge of the heart we've got the marks from the saw blades, and so generally we want to take those out because they're not very nice to look at, and they're a bit uneven. So we can use a sort of half round file, which is great to just get into the curve of the heart. And don't be afraid to use a big file, because they're a lot easier to use for sort of general taking our metal away. And so we've used the curved bit to get into the curve of the heart, and then the top of the heart is rounded, so we can use the flat part of the file. And we're again just pushing away with the file, because the files cut better when it's pushing away, and you can soon get a nice uniformed edge. It's quite a fine file, this one. Now, to get into this little corner, it's quite difficult, and some of these files are just a little bit too big. But what we've got here are some needle files, and these are just tiny versions of those. They come in lots of different shapes, so that's a round file, that's a half round, so it's a miniature version of that one. This is a flat file, so they are sort of miniature versions, and they're great for sort of getting into small corners. So we'll use this a little half round file, and that can get right into the corner of the heart, where the heart becomes like a V shape. And with these little needle files, you can go backwards and forwards, but it's always a good habit to get into, just to always push with the file. You can control it a bit better on the push. And but once you've got, particularly with the edge, once you've got it fairly neatly done, all the sort of saw marks taken out, then you can move to the emery sticks, and we'll have a coarse one. This one's a round one, I think. And again, but you can, and what basically is happening is you're replacing big marks with smaller marks, and as the little file scratches get smaller and smaller, they become more reflective. So if you looked through a highly polished piece of metal through a microscope, you'd see that it was made up of a myriad of little scratches. Now, a great tool to have for the edges is a burnisher, and a burnisher is a polished steel bar, and it's very tough, and it's great for getting into corners, and by just rubbing the surface over the edge you can build up a really bright shine. I mean, we can spend a lot longer on these, just getting all of the big marks out. You can see that really gives a reflective finish. And the burnisher isn't abrasive because it's a very tough steel bar. It smooths down the metal and burnishes the surface, so it gives you a nice smooth reflective surface. And because it's got a sort of graduated point and it's curved, you can follow it around the curve and build up a shine, and that's great for the edges. Now for the surface, it's a bit different, because if we went at it with these big files, we'd end up with very big scratches, and that might take us longer and we'd lose a lot of metal. So what we're going to do is start with the emery sticks first, and they're coarse, but they're not as coarse as the files, and this is going to do the surface piece of metal, and it's a bit we've textured, and the other side has got a bit bruised from the metal plate, but we'll use the emery sticks. And again, we'll start with a coarse one, and with this you can go backwards and forwards, and you can see that it's starting to get brighter, but we are putting scratches in, but they're sort of uniform scratches. And you can turn the file, the emery stick over, and you can use it in different ways because they get worn out in places. Okay, and we keep going, and if you sort of keep changing direction, it helps to stop you digging out any deep grooves by going in the same direction all the time. We've got it it's still scratched, but we've got rid of most of the hammer marks and the marks of when we were texturing. So after that, then we'll just make sure there's no dust and coarse grit on there. Then we can move to a finer one. So this is a 1200 one, and then start again. And what we're doing is replacing those coarser scratches with finer scratches, but because they're getting finer, you can start to see that it's starting to build up a nice shine. It's not quite reflective, but it's getting there. And if your design idea is that it's a sort of brushed finish, then you could perhaps stop halfway through and before it becomes really highly polished. Yeah, it's starting to build up to a nice shine. But we could continue sort of rubbing, but it would take quite a time to get that really highly polished. But I think the best thing to do is to look at the next video of using the polishing machine.